if you're growing quickly, then you end up making recruitment decisions which aren't necessarily always the best recruitment decisions.
We need more web traffic. Why do you need more web traffic? We need more sales. Why do you need more sales? Because this SKU is underperforming, and on and on and on. And then it's quite exhausting though, isn't it?
It is exhausting, and some people some clients get quite annoyed with it. Some don't. Some are fine, but they're like, why are you asking these really probing questions? Because if you don't know the answer as well, you're the marketing director and someone's saying to you, but why are you doing marketing in that area? And they go, I should know this. It's quite embarrassing,
It's a bit like putting a football team together. Are you going to score the goals, save the goals, make the killer pass to create the goal?
Welcome to Embracing Marketing Mistakes, the show where we dive into the lessons, opportunities, and hard-earned wisdom from the world of marketing and public relations. In today's show, we have a slightly different episode for you. This week, we're going to tackle a challenge that hits home for every agency owner out there. How can agencies charge what they're really worth? If you've ever felt like your agency is delivering incredible work, but clients just don't recognise the true value, or even worse, they underpay you for it, then this episode is for you. Today, we're joined by Crispin Manners, CEO of Onvert and former chairman of the PRCA, an expert who's spent years helping agencies like yours and mine rethink their pricing strategy and unlocking greater profitability. Chrispen has seen firsthand how agencies often get stuck in a cycle of undervaluing their services and missing out on the bigger opportunities. Basically, he's here to help us flip the script on pricing, and I think it makes for a fascinating discussion. Many agencies operate on outdated pricing models, charging by the hour or sticking to industry norms that leave money on the table. But the most successful agencies have learned to shift to value-based pricing, where fees are tied directly to the impact that you have on your client's business. And guess what? It's not only possible, but it's the key to sustained growth. So how do you start that journey? We'll explore how to prove your value, what questions to ask your clients and determine their true business goals, and how to move beyond the usual brand awareness type pitches to deliver real business impact. Crispin also shares some real-world examples where agencies have successfully transitioned to value-based pricing and how you can too. So as always, sit back, relax, and let's hear how you can unlock the real value of your agency's work and charge what you're actually worth. Crispin Manners, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Well, Crispin, we've got you on the show because we met about a year ago now, and you've got an illustrious career, as Will's just been pointing out, one of which surprised me, you were a founding fellow of the PRCA, which is quite impressive. So what does that mean?
Well, what does it mean? It's kind of it's a bit like a Blue Peter badge, really, that they hand out to people who've done quite a lot for them. And I guess I was one of the founding fellows because I was on the board for quite a number of years and was chairman for 2. And I also chaired what they then called their professional practices committee, which was where any complaints, if they existed, were brought to be dealt with.
Okay. And so, well, I mean, that's amazing that you're the chairman of the PRCA, and you're also the CEO of Kaizo, right? So my knowledge of Kaizo goes right back to when I first ever started my career, and I had an interview. I started out, my second job was in PR in London for Harvard PR, but I interviewed a couple of places, and I got headhunted actually for a role at Kaizo. So you could have been my boss, but it never came off in the end. So maybe you chose wisely. So why don't you tell us a bit about Kaizo and what you did and what they stood for, and just so that people can understand what they were about.
Well, I guess like many people, I got into PR a bit by accident. My first job was working for a food company, and I applied to become a brand manager. And I went through a really convoluted interview process that took, I guess, about 100 applicants down to the final 2. It sounds like a pitch, this, isn't it? We got to the last 2. A week went by after my final interview and I heard nothing. So So I phoned them up and said, so what's happening? And they said, oh, didn't we tell you you didn't get it? And because I was quite hot-headed back then, I got the hump and resigned.
Okay.
And it wasn't the smartest decision, really, because I'd probably only been married a year. I'd just got a mortgage, didn't have a job to go to. But fortunately, they hadn't got anyone to replace me. So I said I would hang around long enough for them to recruit someone. And in that time, we'll get the nepotism out on the table. My father, who had set up his own PR firm 2 years earlier, took pity on me and decided he needed what he called a bag carrier to come and support him. So without anything else to go to, I agreed to go and join my father and his firm, thinking that it would be a real short-term thing. And I guess I ended up leaving about 35 years later.
Wow. I mean, 35 years is to run an agent. I mean, we've run in this place for 14 years, and that feels long enough. Both of us have got a lot grayer. So how did you manage 35 years? That's impressive.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I joined, there were three of us, and a few years later, because he was heading up towards retirement, I became MD, and up until that point, we had been focusing on corporate and investor relations, which he was a genuine superstar at, but he operated at sort of chairman and chief exec level if FTSE top 50 companies, and I didn't quite see that they would see me in quite the same light. So I decided that we should change direction.
Okay.
Because then we were based out in Bracknell in Berkshire, and there were a whole load of software companies there. I decided we would target the tech industry. And I guess we got lucky because we won our first software client in 1980. No, 1989, I should say, just as the whole tech boom was kicking off. So we got into a growing market at just the right time.
Booming Bracknell.
Back of that, we grew really fast on the back of that. Partly because it was a fast growing sector, and partly because I guess we were probably quite good at winning stuff at the time.
Very modest.
And then we when the dot-com bust hit round about the year 2000, we started to diversify and acquired 3 or 4 smaller agencies to get us into consumer and a whole bunch of other things.
And how did you exit that agency then? Did you sell it? What happened there?
And did you get value?
I sold I sold it. I sold my shares in it to the people I had hired to replace me. So that took a process of from hiring them to them buying me out was probably about 5 years, I guess. And the whole exit thing is really interesting, and I'm actually helping about 4 or 5 agencies right now plan for owner exit, which is a whole topic in its own right, I guess.
You've piqued my interest.
So then on to Onvert then. So why don't we, from Kaizo to Onvert. So obviously, the industry or some aspects of it still excited you and motivated you. Why don't you explain a little bit about what you do now? And a lot of what you do is working directly with business leaders, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I set up Onvert, it was designed to be a sort of sole trader vehicle to allow me to do work I liked, because one of the things that I found towards the latter end, particularly of the 35 years of building an agency, was that I ended up doing things that I didn't really enjoy and didn't really energize me. And I think that's a trap that a lot of owners fall into. So Onvert was designed to get back to doing stuff that was fun, and now I focus entirely on helping agency owners to try and get what they want from their agency, and that is fun, because seeing people start to really get what they hoped they would get from their company, and have a bit more enjoyment doing it, it's actually quite rewarding.
And this is a big question, and you probably can't answer this. What do agency owners want from their agencies, aside from?
I think he's asking himself that one.
Aside from adequate remuneration, is there kind of trends you see? And I assume fun and work that's stimulating and enjoyable comes pretty high, doesn't it?
It's a really interesting one, because it's different for every owner. But what's common to almost every owner is that they don't think about that early enough. They fall into running an agency for whatever reason, don't like their last company, so set up their own company or whatever, and they just start serving clients without necessarily thinking about why they're doing it. So what they see as rewarding does vary by individuals. Some do it to try and earn as much as they can. Others do it to try and make a significant difference. I've helped a really amazing agency in Dublin, and I helped them work on their purpose, and their purpose, paraphrase now, is to make Ireland a fairer society. So they do some sort of real transformational work in Ireland, including things like contributing to changing the abortion laws, contributing to getting equal pay for women, that kind of stuff. So for the owner of that agency, it's more about being able to do that kind of transformational work. Whereas for others, it's more about, it can be more about creating the lifestyle choices for their family.
Interesting. So, and that's led you to write your book, which I've read, which was really interesting, and it's all about value. So I had to read. You said you're going to have to read this book if you're working with me. And I was like, oh God, not another book. I have to read so many marketing books. But yours, you said, and you, what was the description you gave me? It was like, it's not like a normal book. It's not. I didn't have the time to write it as thick or something. But it had loads of examples, and it was really practical. And actually, I found it quite. I don't want to say an easy read, but because I like practical things, practical solutions, and I like examples. Because then you remember it better. So do you want to explain how the book came about and what it's all about?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for your nice comments. I was motivated to write the book because the more I was helping agency owners, I also run some training sessions for the PRCA on running agencies, and obviously encounter quite a lot of senior agency people on those. And the more I met, the more frustrated I got that the brilliant work they were doing wasn't adequately rewarded. Or put another way, they weren't charging the right price for the work that they did. So it's very easy to make statements like that. So I thought, well, if there's a better way of ensuring that you can get paid what you're worth, I might as well try and capture it in a book that could act as a guide and that people could follow. Because charging according to the value you deliver isn't straightforward. It's a bit like peeling an onion. There are lots of different layers that you have to make sure you get right. That's why it ended up being whatever it was, 10 or 11 chapters, because it addresses all of those sort of key components to make sure you actually have a chance of earning what you should. And I think it's an interesting one for me, because I was talking to an agency the other day, and I was actually talking to, if you like, the next generation leadership. The founder wants to get out and has suddenly realized that her firm isn't making enough profit to be attractive to an acquirer. So she's called in a consultant who's looked at it from a financial perspective and is telling her to do things like maximize the number of hours people are billing and all of that sort of stuff, on the assumption that she will price according to industry norms, and industry norms deliver profit before tax of anywhere between about 6% and about 16%. But there are agencies out there that generate 40% before tax. So my view was, don't follow the usual industry approach that says, try and get to 20 if you're lucky, but accept it being 15. Why not try to get to 40 and find a way of doing that? So that was the motivator for the book.
So you can probably tell where the next line of questioning is going to go, because this is starting to get really interesting. And actually, I might add, I assume this is an issue any kind of service-based business might face. So consultants of any kind, I don't know about accountants or lawyers, but anyone that sells their time, I suppose, this is an issue for a lesser or greater degree. But how do we kind of, I think people's ears will prick up and think, great, we need to charge more, we need to sell value. How do we, I suppose the first question is, how do we understand what our solution or our time is actually worth? So rather than just, the 20% markup on the hourly rate or whatever it might be, how do we kind of shift to this new model?
The first thing you need to be able to even begin the shift is confidence. And one of the things I think that still surprises me about the sector, which is full of amazingly talented people who deliver great stuff for clients, is that by and large, the confidence level is ridiculously low. And one of the reasons for that is I think that agencies measure output rather than the impact. And because they do that, they're not used to having conversations with company owners, client owners, about the impact of the work on the client. So really smart professional services companies start with the client outcome and establish the value to the client of achieving that outcome. And if it's a £1 million outcome and your contribution to achieving it is significant, then you can obviously charge a whole lot more than if it's £100,000 outcome. But most agencies don't even try to calculate that. So that the conversation about price usually starts with the client deciding what the budget's going to be. And what I've been hearing this year, and I don't know if you guys have had the same experience, but what I've been hearing this year, not just from agencies in the UK, but from all around Europe and also in the US, is that clients' willingness to vote decent level budgets has diminished. And as agencies are going into the sort of 2025 round of negotiation with their current clients, they're being told budgets are being reduced. And the main reason for that is they haven't proven to the people who create those budgets why they should be spending more.
Is this a collective failure from the industry then?
All industries, a lot of industries.
Yeah.
It's a total failure of the PR sector in general of proving value. And it's one of those arguments that, I know if anyone ever listens to this particular podcast, there'll be people out there going, well, it's impossible for us to prove our value. I reject that completely. All you need to do is ask the right questions to establish the basis on which clients will be measuring the impact for themselves of what they're trying to achieve.
Can you give us an example of that? I think bringing that to life would be really helpful.
Yeah, one of the examples in the book that I used was an example that came from an agency that I was helping, and it was a client that delivered in-home optometry services. You probably see Specsavers are advertising that stuff quite aggressively now. But this particular client had first mover advantage in that sector, and they were private equity backed, and they had very aggressive growth targets, but they could only achieve those growth targets if they recruited optometrists. And recruiting optometrists is quite difficult because most of them work in the National Health Service. So luring people away from what we all know all the criticism about the NHS, but luring people away from what is a secure job to a company that they probably haven't heard of, who's private equity backed and therefore might feel high risk, is not particularly easy. So the client wasn't recruiting at the rate that they needed. So they turned to this agency to try and help them. And the instant reaction of the agency was to say, well, okay, what we'll do is we'll raise awareness about the opportunity. And they thought about what that meant they would do. They added up the total hours and they came up with a price. And the initial price, which they ran by me, was a one-off project fee of £5,000. And the first question I said is, how much are these optometrists paid? And the answer was 60,000. I said, well, how are they recruiting at the moment? They said through recruitment agencies. And I said, so they're paying 20% at least of the annual salary. And if you do the maths on that meant they were prepared to pay 12 grand for every optometrist, and they wanted to hire 80,
Yeah.
So you do, 80 times 4K. Yeah, a lot of money, right? And our agency was going this agency was saying, we're going to charge you 5 grand to help you. What I then got them to say was, okay, so where will you contribute? What's broken in their recruitment process? One was obviously not enough of the right people were hearing about the opportunities. Those that did weren't necessarily the right people to apply, because the conversion from CV to actual interview was really low. So they could contribute by getting more of the right messaging out there. And there were cut the long story short, there were about 3 or 4 key touch points on the journey from potential applicant to a hire, where they could make a significant contribution. So on the back of that, and the fact that that client was clearly prepared to pay £1 million to get these 80 people, they came up with a bigger number. I mean, it wasn't as big as I thought they should be charging, but it was still initially it was 4 times the original. So same work, 4 times. And
did they get the job?
They did. They got the job,
they've really articulated it.
Yeah, and the client after the initial round, the client came back for more, because recruiting with their assistance was much more effective than without it. And that's the other thing I think that agencies aren't rigorous enough about, is saying, well, where else can the client go to get the same contribution, and how and where are we better than doing that? Agencies talk about awareness all the time, but clients can get awareness lots of ways, can't they? Pay per click or stuff. But is it the right awareness in the right people, with the right people and the right message, and does it convert to anything? I think if you approach it like that, you can actually start stealing budget back from other budget lines, if you can demonstrate to the client that not choosing you is actually a high-risk strategy.
To argue that point, though, Crispin, because obviously we pitch all the time, and we use AMEC, which based on the Barcelona principles, and we do measure impact. It's one of the things that we're proud to do. But I will say that when we're doing what I liked about your approach is you reverse engineer the actual total first, and then you wind it back to, and if you hired us, this is how much you'd be saving. So I like that example. But on the flip side, so for the marketers listening to this with the budget, so saying I've got £60,000 next year for my agency. If they get, they called Prohibition to come in and pitch to them. We came in and pitched against their retained agency. Their agency said, this is what we're going to do for £50,000. We come in and go, yeah, but we can demonstrate this, this, and this, and this, and we're going to charge you £65,000. Usually the client will go with the cheapest client. I hate to say it, and that's what most people in this industry will be shouting out, going, it's all very well that you can demonstrate return on investment, but money is money, and they just look at the numbers and go, yeah, but if I get them to do this, they'll do it cheaper. Because we had a pitch we won last, I won't say when, but we won it less than 18 months ago, and we got right to they loved the ideas, they loved the strategy, they loved our videos, they loved our approach. We got right down to it, and they were like, the price, you're more expensive than the other guys. Can you knock down the fee?
But playing devil's advocate on that, and I'm sure you've got a view on this as well, Crispin. Is it not about, like Crispin said, asking those right questions where you do almost come up with, you come up with that value, and I like what you were saying about what's the cost of not doing this. So for every client, there's going to be a 20% recruitment fee equivalent, isn't there? And is it up to us to find out what that is and then show how our solution will deliver value in that context? I mean, I get it. It's easier said than done, because often the client won't know either, will they?
No, they'll say, we want brand, and Crispin, you're completely right. We want brand awareness. And you go, okay, great. How are you measuring brand awareness? And then they look at you and go,
So I suppose other examples we've had, one client wanted to reduce, this was for a social media brief. They wanted to reduce calls to their customer care center. So there's a cost associated with each call that each customer service operative takes. And I think we won the pitch by demonstrating how our social media intervention could reduce the stress on the call center by, say, 20%, thus saving X. So is that what we're talking about? Just really kind of pushing to get to those.
Well, yes, exactly. But I think what the example you gave there is a good example of what I'm starting to see increasingly, is that clients are coming with a brief which has a business outcome, reducing the number of calls to our call centers. I ran a bespoke training session for quite a large agency this year, and I asked them ahead of time to send me examples of the client briefs that they were being presented with, and I expected them to be all activity-based briefs, like raising awareness, etc. And I was really surprised because most of them were all about delivering a business outcome. I mean, there was one from an insurance company, which was a brief to contribute to them winning £1 billion worth of net new business. When a client's got that kind of clarity about effectively what the brief said, is we are putting a team together to help us win £1 billion worth of net new business, and a PR agency is one part of that team. And we want you to show us how you will contribute to increasing the certainty of achieving that. So, I mean, to answer your question, Chris, if you're being presented with a brief with a budget attached, it's probably already too late in the sales cycle for you to be able to influence the price. So my view is that if you position yourself as an agency that is capable of making valuable contributions to achieving really important goals, it's much more likely that you'll have conversations with the people who care about the business goal rather than the activity to get there. This is why I'm saying, the book was into chapters. There is a positioning job to be done that says we're capable of helping you win £1 billion worth of net new business. A lot of people in agency that when I say things like that go, yeah, but we can't guarantee they'll get £1 billion worth of net new business. But the reality is the client isn't asking you to guarantee it. They're asking you to show what your contribution will be. It's a bit like putting a football team together. Are you going to score the goals, save the goals, make the killer pass to create the goal? And agencies, by and large, don't make that contribution clear, or the risk of not receiving it clear either.
This is fascinating, and I think what I found quite interesting about what you've said there is, and there'll be lots of brands listening to this who are putting out PR briefs or social briefs or marketing briefs all the time. So what I'm hearing is, if they can make that link to business impact in that brief, they're going to get a better response from the agency. They're more likely to have a campaign or an activation that actually contributes to that organizational goal. So it's twofold, isn't it? On one hand, brands need to be clear on the business outcomes, and then agencies need to ask great questions to get to that point.
This is exactly what we do, though, isn't it? With our client, with AMEC, the first question we ask is, what is your business objective? Not your comms objectives. What's your business objective? What you're looking to achieve, and then what your comms objective. That's how we build our plan out.
Yeah, and it's we advocate the 5 whys as well. So keep on asking why, and the more you ask why, the more you get to the heart of actually what the problem is, what the challenge is, what the core objective is, beyond
absolutely
something. Because often you end with marketing objective. Often you get stuck on marketing objectives, don't you? We need more brand awareness. We need more web traffic. Why do you need more web traffic? We need more sales. Why do you need more sales? Because this SKU is underperforming. And on and on and on, and then it's quite exhausting, though, isn't it?
It is exhausting, and some people some clients get quite annoyed with it. Some don't. Some are fine, but they're like, "Why are you asking these really probing questions?" Because if you don't know the answer as well, you're the marketing director, and someone's saying to you, "But why are you doing marketing in that area?" And they go, "I should know this." It's quite embarrassing,
But it's better for everyone, isn't it? It's better for the client, better for the agency.
And I think the key thing, I guess there's 2 things to say there is. An agency that asks the right questions can be super helpful to the comms team within the client in raising the perception of the value that comms team delivers internally. I mean, one of the things, again, when I was actively delivering campaigns, one of the barriers we used to come up against all the time is that the sales team thought the marketing team were a waste of space, and they didn't really help each other. So we one of the values we delivered as an agency is we used to break that barrier down, and we would go and educate the sales guys about how we'd make their job easier if they just let us have access to clients, etc., etc. And I think agencies can do exactly the same thing in helping the guys on the inside become respected by the senior people in the business. I mean, we're always talking about how few comms people there are on the board, and that one of the reasons for that is that comms in general doesn't provide business proof of the value that they deliver. So if agencies driving that, it's going to make the guys on the inside look much, much better and be valued as a result. The second thing I guess I'd say, Chris, is most agencies are small enough not to be constrained by lack of opportunity, just constrained by winning the wrong kind of clients. If you want to be known for contributing to delivering really powerful business outcomes, you've got a choice about whether you pursue an opportunity with a client that doesn't get it.
Yeah, I like that.
The more you do of that, it'll just frustrate the hell out of you, and then you'll get bored and tired and all the rest of it, and it won't help the agency. So,
and we do that with inquiries. Like, we try and bat off a lot of things that we don't think that are right for us. You need somebody that suits both parties, that you think you can demonstrate. Because the best work for me is where you feel like you've made a difference to the client, and you're treated like a partner rather than just the bloody agency that trots out like you said, that just trots out campaigns that go in the press. And you need to be valued. And this whole episode is now about value, which is good.
But it's got lessons for both brands and for agencies, which is why I think there's real value here.
Can I ask you? You mentioned before in your show notes, you put avoid the hamster wheel of growth. Do you want to explain what that's all about? Your hamster wheel of growth, because I've got to be honest, I've been on that a few times.
What I'm really saying there is if you're good, you'll win stuff. And once the word gets out that you're good, then you'll attract more opportunities. And if you're good at the sales process, you'll win more stuff. And if I use my own agency as an example, when we made the shift to the tech space, about I don't know 18 months later, we were the fastest grower in the PR top 150, and we had something like 187% growth rate. Now, at one level, you can go, well, that means you went from being worth 20. Having revenues of 20 quid to 40 quid. But joking apart, when you're growing at that rate, you're obviously having to add heads quite fast to serve this business that you're winning. And if you're growing quickly, then you end up making recruitment decisions which aren't necessarily always the best recruitment decisions. Are they the right people? Do they fit well? Have they got the right skills? Can get overtaken by, if we don't get an account manager in fast, we'll just lose the clients we've just won. If you keep that growth going, and in our case, we were number 2 performer in the top 150 over a decade with 34% compound growth. And when you continue to grow like that, you persuade yourself you need things like in-house HR, in-house IT, in-house finance, and all of a sudden you've got 10, 12 people who aren't generating any money, which means you have to go and win more clients to pay for those. And all of that stuff just starts taking over. And as the leader in the business, you suddenly find you're doing all those other things that no one else wants to do in terms of running the business. And at one point, one of my other directors gave me the name Wire Management Man because we were moving offices, and the only guy that was prepared to pick up all the grunt around making sure we had the right office with the right furniture, with the right IT, with everything else was me. And it bored the pants off me, but someone had to do it. And was it the best use of me in doing that? Probably not, because the company could probably have got much more value out of me doing the things that I was super good at, as opposed to just moderately capable at. And the hamster wheel of growth blinds you to all of those important choices.
Yeah, I mentioned that because you said that's what happened to you, and your mistake, you said basically you fell into the hamster wheel of growth. What sort of year was that then where you thought, because I get it, because you don't, when we start an agency, you're right, we start an agency, right back to the beginning of what you were saying, you start an agency with a vision for, mine was like, I want to work for myself. I'd like to work with some people. I want to create an environment that is fun, not too challenging, but I want to work on interesting work, not boring clients, interesting work where we can make a difference in some way. And hopefully I don't have to work 180 hours a week like I was doing when I was freelance. It was just I had to make the supplement from freelance to owner manager. And then that's the inkling stage where you start and you give your money away to hire other people. Then you start getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But before you know it, you're 10 people. And then you're like, right, okay, we're 10 people and now we want to do, let's go for 50. All we know is to grow. That's right. That's what you do. And you say you're looking at growth. You're looking at growth, and then before you know it, you're 15 people. And is this what? I mean, how big were Kaizo before you realised you were in the hamster wheel of growth, where you were just trying to feed the machine?
Well, I think before I answer that direct question, I think you made the point. Suddenly you find you're 10 people, and then you're 15 people. And one of the things I did find at the point. I recognize this when we had probably got to about 25 people, is there are some key thresholds in running an agency which arrive actually quite early on in the development. So my view is that anything less than about 12 people can be run through osmosis, being around the office, because there aren't so many people that each person cannot get a touch point with the leaders and the energizers of the agency. And therefore you don't have to be very process heavy. But once you go past about 12 people, all of a sudden, if you haven't got process, then you find that certain people start to become very disconnected. And being disconnected is obviously a bit of a disaster if you want to have a happy ship and a productive ship. So suddenly you have to start putting process in. By the time you've got up to 25, you don't just have to have processes to run it. You actually have to have processes that satisfy people who are going to audit whether or not you're running the right way, and have you got the right policies like DEI and all of those other things. So if you're the kind of person who just wants to do great work and you don't want heavy duty HR systems, you probably want to keep the business about 10 to 12 strong maximum. But if you've rattled past that, then you've got issues of, well, have I now got to lay people off because I feel like we've got too big? And if you don't want to lay people off, then suddenly you find that you're trapped in feeding mouths rather than achieving what you wanted for yourself.
So how did you get off? Yeah, that does. Literally,
when you said that, the producer looked at me like, we're trapped in this business. We've got people working for us and we're trapped.
Did you get off the hamster wheel, I suppose, is the question people will want to know. And how did you, if yes, how? Or did you just exit the business?
The reality is, Chris said, when I moved from being freelance to setting up the agency, I realized I wanted to do this, 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 and this. I never had any of that. I got a job, and then I found myself running it, and then I found myself winning stuff, and I hadn't thought about any of that. I just kept on going. So in that sense, not very bright. I mean, we grew. I don't know what we were at our largest, 60 odd people. And one of the mistakes I made was that because I hadn't really thought about what the agency was supposed to be doing for me, by the time I got to that point, I was tired. And you know, if you're tired when you're 28, it's very different than being tired when you're 48. And your ability to bounce back and just to re-energize yourself.
Yeah. I am. It depends what time of day it is. I'm 47, so I'm not far away from that.
You have a brief spell of energy at first thing in the morning,
yeah,
and then it's tiredness.
That's it.
For the rest of the
tiredness
day.
And lethargism, if that's a word.
So I suppose not every large agency will be on the hamster wheel of growth, but lots are. Is that a fair assumption? You know, when you're not clear on your why, you know, it's like that Simon Sinek book, The Power of Why, isn't it? You know, having that kind of that why about
Definitely.
what you do. You know, the reason that kind of transcends what you do, like the Dublin agency you gave. They've got a kind of a higher purpose, haven't they? So I suppose understanding your purpose would help, wouldn't it?
Purpose, but not in the marketing, we're sustainable reason. You mean like what your actual why are you getting out of bed? Why are you turning up to work? Why are we employing? Look at the producer again. Why are we employing people? What is the reason for that? That sort of purpose. What is our purpose? God, that's a very deep question for this podcast.
Well, so Will's spot on. It's a chapter in the book. My view is that you have to have total clarity on that, because then it makes it really easy to make the right business choices and right personal choices. Whenever the word purpose comes up, you can get into a debate that, and the sort of classic quote is, "We do PR, not ER." You know, we're not curing cancer and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is, I mean, there's an agency I help who focuses on healthcare, and they focus on healthcare because the guy who runs the agency wants to feel like he's contributing to improving the health of the nation. No, he's not a doctor. He's not designing drugs, but he is helping organizations who can make that impact operate more effectively, and it's what gets him out of bed. But your purpose could be, I want to make as much money as I possibly can before the age of 40. I mean, it doesn't have to be about curing cancer. It just has to be something that guides your decisions. And a lot of agencies haven't got that clarity.
How can they get it?
It does make it much harder to make the right decisions.
Will's asking for a friend.
Yeah, asking for a friend. How can I mean, is there, because there must be a ton of agencies and actually a ton of companies that aren't necessarily agencies that don't have that purpose, and they just kind of trundle along, and they're probably very successful. But what would you say to anyone really that wants to discover their purpose? That's probably quite a big question.
Their personal purpose.
Well, yeah, or an organizational purpose. I mean, is there a framework? What would you say to that? I assume you counsel companies on this.
I bet you get Maslow's hierarchy of needs out and throw a dart at it.
I think if we're talking about an owner-run agency, then it's really important for the owner or owners to really think about what they want first. And a lot don't. And just to give you an example, and it's actually one I quote in the book, and it's a real life one. A guy I have helped now for probably about 12 odd years. When we had this discussion about what mattered to him, one of the things he wanted to be able to achieve was to put his kids through university in the States. And he runs an agency in Central Europe, and at the time was not drawing much out of his agency to try and persuade himself that it was profitable. When he said, I want to do this with my kids, it instantly brought into focus the fact that if he continued to charge what he was charging his clients, that would never be possible. So he suddenly had a reason to go back to his clients to tell them he was going to increase his prices. And he was obviously anxious about that, but they all agreed. And because they were still too low, but they agreed to the increase. And a few years later, he had the opportunity to take on a representative role for an organization outside his own agency. And he asked my view, and I said, well, you've really got your agency running really well, and it's generating what you want. Do you want to have a distraction from that? Because this other thing will distract you. And at that point, he said, well, I'd like to do this because it'd make my parents proud. And I said, well, okay, if it's that important to you, then maybe you should do it. But if we fast forward about 2 years, he did take it on. It did distract him. His revenue in his agency declined, and therefore the profitability with it. But when he came back in with his full attention, it recovered. Now, you might say, well, okay, that's fine. It was worth doing. But about a year later, he was approached by someone who wanted to acquire his business. And he had an idea of what his business was worth, and the acquirer offered him exactly half. And they offered him half because he had had that dip in revenue, and therefore they saw his business as higher risk and with not a nice resilient income stream. So, but if he had admitted to himself that not only do I want to put my kids through university, but I also want to make my parents proud by having a high profile role somewhere, he could have structured his agency to allow him to do that. But because he hadn't thought about that, he created a weakness, which meant he missed an opportunity to exit at the price he wanted to. So thinking about this stuff earlier is so important, because if you don't think about it till too late, you end up getting tired like I did. So my view is start thinking about it even before you start your agency, but certainly within the first year if you haven't done it before that.
I've got a question for you, because that's interesting on what you start, and I think what you're going to start with your business. But you've just given me an interesting thing to discuss with Will at 4:00 today about what our purpose is.
I'm busy then, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, there you go. My purpose is to get some time in the diary. what advice would you give new agency leaders trying to scale their businesses while trying to still deliver value? What sort of advice would you give someone? Let's say someone's out there, they've got a business of 5 or 6 of the consultants. There's a lot of agencies out there, whether they're digital agencies, PR agencies, marketing agencies, small little shops that are doing great work, and they just work on referral. What advice would you give to them if they want to scale but they don't know how? What's the sort of key advice you'd give them?
Well, the first thing I'd do is I would ask them to ask themselves why they want to scale. What's the purpose of scale? Okay, to give you an example, as I mentioned, I'm helping guys prepare for exit, and one of the key things that you want to do there is to really build profitability, because it's appealing to an acquirer. It's also quite appealing to the owner if they're generating more, because they can take out more, but even before they've sold. If you look at some of the results of even some of the larger agency groups out there. I mean, I was looking at one of them. I think it was Next 15, but it might not have been. And I think their profit before tax was 9%. Okay. Now, if you're thinking, if you're a relatively small agency and you're thinking of scaling, and just use these numbers as an example, if you're 1 million fee making 40%, it's the same amount of money being generated as a 4 million fee agency generating 10%. Right?
True. With 4 times less headache as well.
Yeah.
Well, think about all the extra work that the leaders have got to do to fuel 4 million rather than 1 million. So some people will be shouting at the screen going, well, who can make 40%? Well, you can if you position it right. So what does scale mean? Does scale mean scale the profit, or does it mean scale the people? And if it's the people, do you then want to get into all of this extra process you have to have? I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's not right for everybody. And you've got to really know yourself to know what will energize you, make you happy in the process of scaling.
Mm.
Once you've got that clarity, if you really want to scale sustainably, the next thing you've got to be really, really all over is, what is the solution we're offering to the market? Not what are the services, but what's the solution? What are we really, really, really good at? And, I help an agency in Milan, and, when we looked at what they are brilliant at, is they are brilliant at launching products and brands in Italy. And because they are so successful at launching products and brands in Italy, they can charge a premium for that launch process. Effectively, their promise is, we'll deliver success on arrival in Italy. Now, that's very different from we'll do you a press launch. So if you really want to scale, make it easier to scale by attracting the right kind of client that you can go on to satisfy, by having total clarity about the solution that you have on offer. If that makes sense.
That does. Fascinating.
If you've been on the show now, if you were us, who would you interview next, and why?
Oh my gosh!
Everyone does that.
We should brief people on this question.
Yeah, we should.
Who would I? I would interview the chief exec of a couple of clients about their perceptions about the value that PR agencies can deliver, and what an agency would have to do to persuade them to part with more money for the PR budget.
Oh,
that'd be an interesting perspective.
We've actually got a CEO of one of our clients, the first one ever. We thought we'd bring him on the show in a few weeks, so that'll be interesting. Quite bold question in there to do live on the podcast. Could
be quite a sobering answer, couldn't it?
Yeah. How do you work now, Crispin? This is my second to last question, penultimate question. How would you work with? So, if there's an agency owner out there, they've listened to this, they've thought Crispin really knows his shizzle. How can I get hold of him? And what sort of services do you do other than? Yeah, it sounds like when you were talking to Will, I felt like it was quite a cathartic experience for William. He was getting it out.
It was cathartic. Yeah,
it feels like, so. It's like a consultative approach. What is it that you do with owners, I suppose?
Well, first of all, I only want to work with people who I think I've got a chance of liking, because life's too short not to do that. And I want to work with people who feel like they need help to achieve something important. Okay. So given those two things, the way that I normally work is I first of all start by doing what Will was saying earlier, which is I ask the whys. Why do you want help? And I go up the stack till we get to the point which is where we've got the most important reason to have someone like me on board. And if when that reason surfaced, I think I can contribute, then it's a case of identifying where those contributions will be. And if, for example, we're just not growing fast enough, or I've got a 10-year plan and I'd like to exit in 10 years or earlier, and I want to prepare for that, the way that I would work is we would identify the number one priority to go for to achieve whatever it is that agency owner's trying to achieve, whether it's exit or more profit or more work-life balance or better recruitment strategy or whatever it might be.
Okay.
And then the way that I do that is I essentially facilitate the owner's own thinking, because one of the things I found is that there are certain consultants who will go in with their cookie cutter and go, this is what you do. And that is only ever partially successful because it doesn't have the buy-in from the owner. So essentially what I try and do is get the light bulb to go on with the owner about what's the most important thing for them to focus their time and attention on, because then stuff happens.
Crispin, people will be listening to this and they'll be wanting to get in touch with you. What's the best way they can find out about what you do?
I would ask them to send me an email so we can set up a call. And my email address is my name, crispin.manners@onvert, that's onva.co.uk.
Fantastic.
And you're also on LinkedIn extensively, and we'll put your details in the show notes. Crispin, thanks you so much for your time. Bit of a different episode this, where we talk about owning agencies, whether it's PR, marketing, or digital. It's all been useful, I think, for agency owners, and fascinating for me. And I'm definitely going to have that conversation with Will at some point later today.
And also for those brands wanting to write better briefs. So I think there's value across the board. But yeah, thank you, Crispin.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone, and thanks for inviting me.